So this is the last of the more kind of basic programming challenges on the plant growing simulation prep sheet. So number 33. And what this is regarding is that in the skeleton code, you can see that there's an additional emoji, the rock emoji, that's not used anywhere in the code. So again, something like this in the skeleton program is always going to sort of mean that there will probably, almost definitely will be a question in the actual exam regarding this, because there's an unimplemented feature. What we had to do, the programmer who designed the simulation ran out of time before being able to implement the rocks feature. Update the create new field subroutine so that after creating the field, the user is asked if they want to add rocks to the simulation. If the user responds with Y, they are then asked to input a number of rocks to be added. The program should then ask the user to enter a series of XY coordinates, each time placing a rock in the position requested by the user. And then we can see the sort of example here. How would you go about doing this? So we need to, first of all, go to the create new field subroutine. We want to display this prompt and store the answer in a variable. Let's call it rocks wanted. And if rocks wanted is equal to Y, then we need to ask the user how many rocks, num rocks. And let's then do this however many times they want it. So how would you achieve this? So when this input is 3, this block of code needs to be repeated 1, 2, 3 times. So if this was 5, it would happen 5 times. If this is 10, it would happen 10 times. So this is a for loop, right? So for new rock, or rock num might make more sense, for rock num in range num rocks. The reason I'm going to use rock num is because each time we need to print out what is the number of the rock. We also need to start this number at 1. So what that means is that we will need to go up to num rocks plus 1. This is because Python uses zero-based indexing. In this case, we want to count from 1 inclusive of the number 1, 2, 3, not just 1, 2. So let's print the message. Enter the coordinate of rock num. Let's ask the user to enter the numbers. So let's call it coordinate. Coordinates. Coordinate. I never know whether it's a singular. And what we then need to do is we need to work out, okay, we need to take x and y from coordinate. So how would we do that? Well, separating each part of the coordinate is a comma and a space. So this is how we would separate the string into 2 separate strings. And then we need to take the field and we need to say, okay, what is the row and what is the column? And that is where we place the rock. Here, notice that I'm using x. I'm getting x and y from splitting the string. That means the data type of each would still be string. So I need to use the int function to cast the y string and the x string into an integer. Another thing to note is that y comes first because y is representing which row. We look at the rows vertically, row by row. And then secondly, we need to say x, and x is representing the column, column by column. After this is executed, then we need to print the message to confirm that that was completed. Let's test it, let's see if it works. So this was question 33. Save. It's important to save in Genie. And let's just fix the tab issue. So the reason this keeps happening is because I've got a separate file each time. So in your case, you'll probably be using the same file, so you will only need to do this once. Indent type should be spaces to match the document. Let's replace any tabs that I've typed with spaces. So now what this does is if I type tab, it will just put 4 spaces instead of the tab. Let's run it again. And let's test it by saying -1. Let's not load a file, but let's say yes to add some rocks. Let's add 10 rocks. Let's add a rock at 0, 0, and 1, 1, and 2, 2, and 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9. That should be my 10th rock. And then we can see that the rocks got added to the simulation. You will notice here for this question, you might want to put in some data validation. So like, what if the user inputs this in the wrong format? But unless the question asks you to do so, you shouldn't do anything that is kind of beyond what is needed. Let's move on to the second part of this question. So, oops, after speaking with the client, the programmer now understands that the rocks can also be added at random if the user wishes so. Update the create new field subroutine so that the rocks question is updated to account for random rock placement. If the user responds R, 10 rocks are placed at random into the field. Note, you will need to consider that a rock can't be placed over another rock that has already been placed. So let's go through the solution to this. Let's change the prompt. So we need to check if rocks wanted is Y, we still run the solution for question 33. But if rocks wanted is R, we need to now run the solution for question 34. So how would this work? So we always need to loop 10 times, and we don't need the rock num this time. We just need to count 10 times. We're not actually wanting to do something with the iterator variable. So in Python, you would just write I. The most Pythonic way of doing this is to just use an underscore as the variable name to show that you don't actually need the iterator variable. And then we need to generate 2 random numbers. So let's generate a random X number. I think what I'd like to do is to make this a bit more consistent. Let's call this row and col instead. Again, it's important to kind of match what's in the skeleton program for you. So let's make a random number for the row and a random number for the col. And one thing you need to consider is that we've got the random library imported already. And it might make more sense to actually use rand range. And because we've imported the library as a whole, this is why the syntax is random dot name of function, random dot rand range, random dot choice. If we were to do an import of from random import rand range, then we would just access the function at like its top level namespace. So the minimum value for the X and Y position is 0. Now you need to consider what's the maximum value. So the maximum value across the field for the column will be the field width. That will be 1 less than the field width, which is why I'm using rand range. Rand range is exclusive of the upper bound, just like Python's range function, whereas randin would include, so then I would need to do -1. So in this case, in this particular scenario, it makes sense to use rand range. I've done this the wrong way around, sorry. No, the right way around, yeah. The maximum value for the row is the length of the field. This is the length, the number of rows, and the width is the number of columns. So we're getting there. So now what I need to do is index into the field and put a rock there. And this will work, but we're not actually covering this bit at this point. You will need to consider that a rock can't be placed over another rock that has already been placed. So how do you implement that? When we generate the random number, we need to keep doing that until the numbers that have been generated are not ones that are already a rock. So maybe this means that we don't actually need the for loop. we might need to say something like, while rocks placed is less than 10, keep going, and then rocks placed will start as 0. And let's make it so that we only increment rocks placed if the row and column number is acceptable. So something like, if this is not already a rock, if the random position is not already filled by a rock, then let's make it a rock. And now let's increment by 1. I think that's the sort of cleanest solution to this. So rather than using a for loop, it's not just strictly 10 times, because this might run 11 times, it might run 12 times. Unlikely, but it could run 13 times or more. So because it's indefinite, it would make the most sense to use a while loop here rather than a for loop. So now let's test it. Let's make sure we haven't broken the feature that we did before. And so this is question 34, but it made sense to put it all in one sort of solution, I think, for this one. Let's say -1, let's say no. Let's put in R for random rocks. And we've got a runtime error. That's rock wanted. Rocks wanted. Let's try that again. Try R. And now we've got another problem. Built-in function or method has no random.randRange. Ooh, interesting. Built-in function or method has no attribute randRange. Sorry. So we have not imported random globally. So import random would then require us to reference the library before the function. In this case, because we've just imported everything from the function, from the library, we don't actually need to specify it. So we've imported all functions so that they're now at the kind of top level namespace. Try this again, let's see if it works this time. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rocks placed at random. Is it possible for us to test whether or not this bit is working? Probably not. So unless the exam question specifies a particular type of test that you need to do, then just don't worry about it. However, one thing that I would advise is when something is being done at random, you can't just test it one time. You shouldn't just show one screenshot. You need to show multiple screenshots to prove what you have done is actually working at random. So let's just do it again. Now this proves that the rocks that I have been placed are being placed at random because they're in different positions. Another good thing to practice doing is to make sure that you've not broken the feature that you used before. So we've just extended the program to account for question 33 and question 34. Let's just test the solution to 33 again. Let's just try 3 rocks this time. Okay. So we confirm that still works, and we can also choose to put the rocks in at random as well.